looking at a few operational measures that we'll chat about. I think the really interesting thing that I thought about from taking that into not just this industry, but even beyond as people are building out their own companies, is they provide a bit of a framework to think about how companies typically create enterprise value. And they do that through three things. So they focus on sales growth or revenue, which is where everyone is typically focused on, margin improvement, which makes sense. And the third is resource utilization, which is often underlooked and the core of what the course was about. So how do you unlock capital tied up in operations, tied up in inventory to support growth and throughput?
Welcome to How I Grew This, where we dive into the dynamic world of digital marketing and invite leaders in the space to explore how they overcome industry challenges to achieve growth. Hello, and welcome to How I Grew This. I'm your host for the day, Amanda Vandiver, and I am joined by the wonderful Alexa Serrano for today's show. She brings over 8 years of experience in the retail banking space, from traditional to challenger banks within a digital sales, marketing, and growth capacity. She is the Director of Client and Product Growth at Simplii Financial, where she leads a team overseeing campaign strategy across Simplii's banking product portfolio, as well as the brand's partnerships and sponsorships. And she is currently completing her executive MBA at Kellogg as well. So very excited to have her on the show to share insights about her journey in digital banking, principles of operational efficiency, and managing intergenerational teams. Alexa, welcome.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. It was a no-brainer to have you. Really excited to have you share your insights with all of our listeners. And maybe to start us off, can you maybe take 1 to 2 minutes to tell us a bit about how you got started in the digital banking industry and maybe what inspired you to pursue this path?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a bit of an interesting path because academically, I didn't pursue business at all. So I'd done my undergrad in life sci at the University of Toronto. So very different from the retail banking space. But through a connection, I secured an administrative co-op placement at the bank and a team that managed technology and vendor and operations management. Throughout my university career, I came back in different capacities each summer, eventually being hired full-time as a business analyst, focused on process engineering and process mapping of all things.
Wow.
But I knew I wanted to be at the forefront of innovation, creativity. I wanted to be where clients were actually viewing creative. And so I ended up networking for 11 months straight until I landed in a digital sales role. And I also pursued a digital strategy and sales communication certificate at U of T. And there I was responsible for campaign execution on CIBC.com, our mobile app and our online banking platform. And I worked with cross-functional teams to bring those campaigns to life on CIBC.com. And then from there, I really wanted to get a lens into the marketing world. So I wanted to work with creative and media agencies to understand how that piece worked, and moved over to the marketing side and was there for about 2 years, left really quickly to pursue an opportunity at a competitor, and then found my place on the growth side at Simplii Financial, which really merged a lot of my experience in the past, even my first job around process engineering and process maps, as well as digital strategy and marketing, given we not only look at the creative, but we also need to understand the bottom line and how what we're doing across all the acquisition and retention campaigns support the bottom line of the business.
Amazing. And I definitely want to dig into a little bit of that process side with you today, but I want our listeners to really hear that. She said she networked for 11 straight months, so don't give up. That is some grit. I love it.
I think I had a coffee every week, probably 2 a week. And then I would have my list of questions in my notebook. And my pro tip is to always ask, is there anyone in your network, based on my experience or based on what I'm looking for, that you would connect me with or you'd be open to connecting with? And you'd be surprised at how many people are willing to share their network.
People genuinely ultimately do want to help, I find, especially if you take the time to build that connection. So that's really awesome to hear. Amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. And of course, you shed light on a little bit of that always learning and that grit, which I think shows up as well in the fact that you're also on your way to earn your master's in business administration, as if you weren't busy enough. So what called you to pursue your executive MBA? And maybe tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like so far.
I would love to. So about a year ago, I started to consider getting my master's degree, less so for the hope or the outcome that it would result in career progression or promotion, but truly for the learning experience. I mentioned that I did my undergrad in life science, and ultimately back then I was hoping to become a doctor or dentist, but changed paths. And so really looking at my academic career, I really wanted to learn the minutia of finance fundamentals that I've been exposed to: accounting, finance management, capital markets. But so that was one piece of it. But I was also super eager to take my leadership skills and executive presence to the next level. And the executive MBA program, which is completed while you're working full time, is geared for candidates who typically have at least a decade of experience, if not more, and mostly with leadership positions. So for me, the Kellogg Schulich program came to me for a few reasons. Like, one, the academic reputation of those schools in Canada and the US. Additionally, their schedule. So while you're doing work and school full time, it's a lot, but they have options for you to have a summer break, a winter break, which is fantastic.
Are we in summer break yet?
Or in summer break. Yeah. I just had my last exam last week.
Congrats.
So it's been great. Thank you. And finally, they also do international electives across US, Asia, and Europe because they have Kellogg has partners campuses there. So it's been fantastic academically. But I think the other piece that I wasn't expecting as much learning out of was learning from my cohort. So we have over 50 students who are coming from 19 plus industries. And there's probably only 3 or 4 of us in banking. So it's been fantastic to learn across different industries and how they're applying growth in their different companies.
Oh, that's awesome. So would you say that you spend a lot of time in that little banking pod, or is it really just all intermixed and shared?
No, it's interesting. They put you into different groups and you're with that group for the entire time. Not to say you don't mingle with the rest of the cohort, but they ensure that your group is a mix of different personality sets as well as different industries. So I do talk to some of the banking folks from time to time, but really my group doesn't have anyone in banking, which is great.
Wow, that is really neat to expand your horizons and learn about those other industries as well. But amazing. This sounds like it was really thought out and that it is a program that you are able to do while also maintaining a successful day job as well. So that's wonderful to hear and inspiring, I'm sure, for a lot of our listeners. And really, what I find is the most successful people do have that trait of always learning and always wanting to learn and finding success as defined by the fact that they learned something new that day, perhaps. So wonderful to hear. Speaking of which, can you tell us a little bit more about what you are studying and maybe any key principles that you've learned that have helped you approach your role in a new way already?
Yeah, there's been a few. So we've had 2 modules. I'm basically halfway through the program, so it's still a lot of learning to be done. But there are 2 main courses that come to mind in terms of direct applicability into the job. So the first would probably be competitive strategy. It's a course taught by a Kellogg professor called Sonia Marciano. She's fantastic. And she really honed in on the ways to build enterprise value in a competitive market and build a moat around your company by prioritizing your investments, understanding your value proposition and what customers are and they're willing to pay for your service. She taught us about some different kind of key case studies that were really interesting. So I really loved that course. And the second, which caught me by surprise, was operations management. So it was taught by a professor. His name is Robert Bout. He's a Belgian Kellogg professor. Has also been recognized as one of the best 40 under 40 professors. And he specializes in operations management, more so from a manufacturing perspective, but not to say it can't apply to digital. And what was really eye opening for me was the direct tie in operations and how through focusing on that, you can unlock value creation. So I'd say those 2 were directly applicable into thinking about how I run the team or things that I want to take into the future as we build out Simply.
Wow, that's really interesting to hear. And what comes to mind for me is the fact that digital and mobile are often so about innovation and moving fast and the idea of replacing legacy systems and practices. But it sounds like there are a lot of ways we can look to more traditional industries as models for operational efficiency or whatever it may be. So I'm curious if you have any wisdom for our listeners, considering most of them probably are in the digital space, of how they can look to more traditional industries or practices for inspiration.
Yeah, for sure. I think it comes down to the basics. Like the operations management course I mentioned was looking at and centered around core manufacturing operational principles, understanding the core processes that are tied to unlocking value, and then measuring them based on not financial measures, which are a look to the past, but looking at a few operational measures that we'll chat about. I think the really interesting thing that I thought about from taking that into not just this industry, but even beyond as people are building out their own companies, is they provide a bit of a framework to think about how companies typically create enterprise value. And they do that through three things. So they focus on sales growth or revenue, which is where everyone is typically focused on, margin improvement, which makes sense. And the third is resource utilization, which is often underlooked and the core of what the course was about. So, how do you unlock capital tied up in operations, tied up in inventory to support growth and throughput? And so that was super interesting to me to think about because in my organization, I'd say we do all three, but one that we're super focused on, which makes sense, is sales growth. But there's still a ton of room on the table from a resource utilization perspective, even in the way that our teams interact with one another to get work done.
Okay. Yes, definitely. Okay. So even as you were talking about it, it started to crystallize a little bit. We, as team members, all trying to help our company achieve their goal, are that resource that needs to be optimized and efficient. Wow. So bringing it back to the basics. Yeah, that's really insightful. Thank you. I think it would be interesting for you to dive deeper into how some of those frameworks have changed your approach to the campaigns that you run, how the process has affected how you approach acquisition or retention campaigns for our audience. Can you share anything there?
Yeah, I think for me, it's more about the process of how all of that comes together. Ultimately, we learned in that class is the goal of good operations and lean operations is looking at every single process through a lens of what is this actually providing value for the client. And if you have that kind of train of thought in your mind, there's a lot of opportunity to eliminate waste and time effort. So for us, as we look to retention and acquisition campaigns, thinking through the journey of how many touch points are actually needed for a client so that we don't become an irritant, thinking through what are their competitors sending through to these potential clients that we want to hone in on. So I think a lot of it, and probably a main example has been, and this is getting back to truly the basics, is even eliminating opportunities for our team to get in the weeds with our legal approval. So banking is a highly regulated industry, which is good, but at the same time,
Has, its pros and cons, a lot more compliance to deal with.
exactly. I think for one thing, what I've really been focusing on with my team is for them to identify what are the continuous hurdles that you guys are facing on a weekly, monthly basis that we may potentially want to escalate to the business to say, we actually perceive this as low risk. We as a business want to provide blanket approval on this if it ever comes back. And actually, we'll save 2 to 3 days in our process and our work back schedule that can unlock maybe 1 to 2 campaigns actually executing and being launched in a month or in a quarter. So it's about finding those kind of small pockets of efficiencies and alleviating them for the team that have been really a good approach that has come through in some of the operations kind of academics.
Wow, that's really effective, it seems, and the impact is clear. How do you work with your team through that to identify, hey, there is this little pocket here? There must be a lot of constant communication.
Yeah, my team and I are in constant communication. I'd say we don't have a formal brainstorm process, and maybe that's something we'll build to. But what we do is just have a continuous kind of feedback loop in our weekly meetings, say what is working, what is not working, what's a consistent roadblock. And oftentimes we'll tally that. And I think through working with my counterparts and leaders across the organization, so we typically have leader check ins every quarter to say, okay, what are some of the opportunities from a process perspective that you guys want from the growth team, that I'd like to see from the sales team, that I'd like to see from the MarTech team? And we really have a collaborative kind of open discussion about process enhancements and improvements based on us giving the space for our teams to really share the small minutia of what could make their day-to-day easier. So I think it's about opening up the channels for different leaders to connect about process and also giving your teams the ability to feel like they can provide feedback on even the smallest of things.
Sounds like a good community you fostered within that team as well. I don't want you to have to go into any specifics, but something you mentioned really caught my ear, which is the fact that you want to be able to reach out via all these touch points without becoming an irritant to your consumers and managing everything from acquisition to retention that encompasses quite a lot. So, without digging into any specifics, are there any high level learnings or lessons you found to be true about how you approach your end users without irritating them and finding them at the right time with the right message without bombarding?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that probably all organizations face. But I think, and this goes back to the core principles of digital marketing, which is really looking at how we can best personalize. So, based on the type of client you are, the amount of products that you have, your digital engagement. We try to have a gauge of how many communications would be ideal for that client. And I wouldn't say we're perfect yet. What we're trying to get to is be thoughtful about what's truly relevant to that client by looking at some of the behaviors, their spend transactions, and what's important to them, and mirroring that back. But I do think it's a continuous challenge, especially in the mobile banking space, is how do we find the balance between relevance and irritation, because we're also bombarded with messages across all different platforms. The one good thing is that banking is quite important to everyone. Finances are very important to everyone. So for us, it's about finding that balance, but also making sure that we're not using every single channel for sales, right? Finding the messages and finding the channels that are truly informational, truly a watch out from a fraud perspective versus one that's a bit more sales focused. And I think that's where we're trying to lean into, is establishing those guidelines for specific channels that are available to us within the mobile app.
Yeah, awesome. And one thing that I find in working with companies across the mobile industry is what can be really helpful, and it sounds like you have, is that holistic view of all of the touch points that are reaching your customers and all of the possible channels and places where messages are coming from. Because often I think companies will get into a trap where each channel is treated as a silo. And so one team is off thinking, I'm only sending them 2 messages per week, but in addition to the rest of the teams, that can add up to quite a lot. So it sounds like you do have that high level view of the whole user journey and how it all plays in together.
We do. And a big part of that was bringing some of the MarTech capabilities in-house, because we used to work with different agencies. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners work in organizations where you work with different agencies for different channels. And it exactly expands on what you're talking about, is you end up having a siloed approach, and it's really hard to orchestrate the full journey. So I think taking a look at how you can unify that with one organization, I'd say is hugely beneficial.
Awesome. To switch gears just a little bit, I want to dig into your trajectory and your success. Let's start with some of the things that you'd say have led to your success in your role at Simpli. Maybe any particular habits, mindsets, or practices that you attribute it to.
I think my success in my role at Simpli has come with great people. It's come with collaborative people who want to do great work, who strive to work smarter, not harder, and really through leadership that has promoted autonomy. I think when I came into the growth role at Simpli, there wasn't a set list of roles and responsibilities. And I've had to craft under guidance with leadership of the things we want to focus on, which has been hugely kind of fulfilling. But beyond this, I think the maybe three key things that have led to the success have been truly understanding our clients and becoming best friends with analytics and Tableau dashboards. I expect and I hold myself accountable to know a lot of the different numbers and across all different products about penetration rate or cross sell rate, all those sorts of things. Because without knowing that, you won't have as much of a focus. And I'd say being obsessed with the customer experience, especially being a digital bank, we still have a lot of ways to improve, especially looking to our competitors across the pond and what they're doing. But being obsessed with the customer journey, especially being fully digital, is something that I think is also been a key factor in success. And then I'd say establishing small habits for myself and my team. So small acts of diligence and commitment that keep the everyday running smoothly, whether that's updating our kind of roadmaps for the year, looking at our performance on a weekly basis, looking at our performance even on a daily basis to see, okay, how are we moving the needle or what do we need to focus on? So I'd say ultimately a key focus on the business and how we can improve.
Amazing. And you talked at the beginning there about great people and surrounding yourself with great people. And I think that has played a role in probably the team that you've built as well at Simpli. So I would like to dig into a little bit about what managing that team is like. And I know it often involves navigating generational differences, especially with millennials and now Gen Zs entering the workforce. So how do you approach managing these generational dynamics, and what strategies have been effective, would you say?
That's a great question. It's funny seeing all of the millennial manager TikToks flowing up on TikTok and what
I
that's like.
love them.
My team is often like, you're such a millennial manager, but I take that as a compliment. Managing generational dynamics in the workplace as a millennial manager is challenging. It's a really tough position to be in, especially being in, I think, middle management, because you're obviously reporting up. You have a team that you want to continue to motivate and also help to solve problems for them. So I think I've tried to seek a balance and try to be as adaptable as I can to each person, knowing that there's some key themes, I'd say, and key experiences that generations above me and generations that are now coming into the workforce are experiencing. And it's really about, I'd say, from an approach and things that have worked, is being observant and curious as to what motivates them. What do they want to do? What do they like? What do they not like? What's the best way to communicate to them? And that's just being inquisitive and asking them questions. And I'd say that the second is being clear and setting expectations about what my core values are as a leader, what my vision and expectation is for the team. So there's no gray area of confusion. I think that's been really helpful. But I'd say being curious is one because each person is different. And it's just important, I think, to know your team and what motivates them so you can motivate them accordingly.
Absolutely. We're all people, right? So not only understanding what motivates each of them, but giving them that insight into you. And I think that is so helpful for a team. And it sounds like anyone would be lucky to be on your team for sure.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, I'd also like to hear if you've looked to any mentors. Have there been any important mentorship in your career? Can you share any key experiences about mentors that have shaped your professional journey?
Totally. I think mentorship has played a really big role, especially in my early 20s. And I say it's actually something that it's coming back up now. I would love to re-find a mentor. The mentor that I had at the bank was fantastic and she wanted to do great things outside of the organization. But really, she gave me a ton of her time when I knew she was busy. She allowed me to ask her all types of questions, whether it's personally or interpersonal with my manager at the time. And she really was, I think, for the first time, super open, just sharing her experience and sharing her feedback. And I think with mentorship, it's about finding that person that clicks. So often we think about, I'm going to find a mentor here in this industry, but it's really about the personality fit. And so I mentioned earlier, I had gone on 11 months of 2 coffees a year. So I have my little notebook and my questions, and I'd have 5 questions I'd ask every single person. But oftentimes, some of those coffees, I left them not feeling great, didn't feel like we connected, which is normal. But some of them, I felt such a great connection. And so it's those that I wanted to pursue and ask them for their time. And eventually asked some of them to become official mentors of mine and met them on a quarterly basis, walked through what I'm doing to support my boss or what I'm doing to support my team or what I'm doing to support my goals. And they just really help to be a pillar of support and guidance outside of your day-to-day manager, which I think is an interesting thing that your day-to-day manager isn't necessarily always your mentor. There is that kind of distinction. And I find that some of our younger generations that are coming in almost have the expectation that they are one person. And so it's about finding that balance and offering them, maybe you should find a mentor. I think it'd be great. I've had great experiences in my life and my career. So another piece of mentorship that has also been helpful is also encouraging my team to seek out mentors as well.
And you hit on something there that I think people need a reminder for, which is that go out there and officially ask someone to be your mentor. I think that's a step that people can often forget, but it definitely, I think, establishes that. It gives them that opportunity to commit or to say, hey, maybe let's find someone else. And otherwise, you think you have a mentor and you actually don't.
Yeah, you're just going on 4 coffee chats a year, but you didn't realize that they don't realize that you're your mentor. So yeah, I totally agree. I think asking the official question is really important.
All about that all around, it sounds, and finding that communication and that transparency and voicing your motivations and everything there. And as we summarize some of that advice that's already been given, do you have any other advice that you'd like to give to aspiring digital marketers or growth leaders who want to make an impact in their organizations?
I'd say growth leaders who want to make an impact in an organization could probably focus on maybe 2 core things. So the first is to really understand, regardless of your industry, understand what's happening in other markets. Keep a keen eye on what's happening within your industry in Latin and Europe and Asia, North America. Understand the nuances of that market, how the different regulation can help or hinder them. I think that's one thing that I've been focusing on is I've seen a competitor grow amazing in this area. What's helping them do that? How is their environment or the market super ready for them, let's say? And also just gives you an opportunity to have ideas. And the second would be to, when you're thinking about hiring for your team, hire intrinsically motivated people and take the time to understand what motivates them and take care of them, what ideas they have and care for the growth, even if it means pushing them beside you or above you. I think those are key for growth leaders thinking about making an impact.
Growth leaders should want everything to grow, all the people around themselves and
Even
all.
themselves.
Oh, yes. Amazing. And I know you're surrounded by some really great minds, maybe some in digital, maybe some not, but you're obviously exposed to a lot in your role too. So, are there any trends or innovations that you're most excited about in mobile marketing or digital, and maybe how you see the role of growth directors evolving in the next few years?
Yeah, there's such a ton. The topic of AI is huge. I went to Collision this year, which is hosted in Toronto, a
I've
big
been
tech.
to that a couple
Oh,
times in
you said
Toronto. Yeah.
awesome, awesome. Okay, so it was great, but almost every talk was talking about AI, AI, AI. And yes, there's a lot of opportunity for unlocking the potential for brand and Gen AI. But I think what I'm excited about is beyond the creative and copy tests that Gen AI can do for us, beyond the offer personalization, which almost feels like table stakes when we talk about AI. To me, I think there's a huge, exciting opportunity to give each client, at least from a banking perspective, I think about it for Simply, to eventually give each client a personalized Gen AI assistant within our banking app. You can choose the voice, choose the avatar, and have it help you with all your banking needs. I feel like that is a not a trend that we're seeing, but maybe potentially a future innovation with the pace of how fast things are moving. I could see to give that super personalized experience, especially being a digital bank. Nobody can go into a branch and ask for X, Y, and Z. They have to call in or do everything on their app. So I definitely see that kind of an expanded mandate of chatbot into that. So I think that's a really cool future state. And then I think growth directors, what will they have to evolve in the next years? I think just with how fast technology is growing and how the regulation is going to follow, I think it's going to be really focused on partnerships as well as your marketing tech stack. Right. So how are you setting yourself and your team up for integrations that will unlock value for your clients or unlock capabilities for your business? I think that's going to be a huge and key focus.
Awesome. Yeah, and just a note on what Simply is doing for customers, I'd like to say that even now, a lot of the more traditional banks are probably realizing that consumers want to go to the app to have these interactions. We don't necessarily want to go into a branch to have that. And so it's awesome to see that you're already thinking about how to make that experience of having it all at your fingertips even more personalized and even more readily available. All right, Alexa, this has been so wonderful to learn from you and all of your achievements and the best practices and tips that you've shared in terms of how to grow in your career, as well as how to incorporate more traditional operational efficiency practices into the digital space and build great teams and look for mentorship. So it has been a total treat getting to know you a little bit better and hearing your wisdom. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And it was such a great time chatting with you.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you to all our listeners. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please leave a review wherever you listen to this and share with someone trying to grow their career. Until next time, keep growing.